So I now want to talk about another movie that I've been checking out. As you know, I do check out these films and try to give a good perspective and recommendation if anyone's interested in going for it. This time, I kind of decided to go for Black Swan. And the implication of why, because I remember trailers years ago, and I thought this movie was interesting. At the time, I was into dancing as well, and there was a lot of aspects which gave me the implication it was kind of a Jekyll Hyde thing. I'm watching it now, and it's very differently from what my expectations were. It kind of goes into the psyche of this young female performer who's going into who's it's more in terms of her characterization, going into the showbiz business, and a lot of things that you could kind of project and say are like kind of like culture norm of some certain things in that kind of industry or other places. I'm not going to go into too much specific in certain areas, but putting it on the outline or just being able to express certain things that were interesting to me, and I really picked up and enjoyed from the movie. Now, there's a lot of confliction when you're watching at the viewer, your perspective of things. There's a lot of times where I couldn't tell if this was a actual theme that the character was doing, or was this something that the what do you call was this something that the character was envisioning herself. In my mind, I first she was quite drugged. She was on psychedelics or something. There was a lot of points where I just felt the scenes were so crazy, but the way they decided to kind of formulate it is that they made it seem like you couldn't tell the difference between if this actually happened onwards until afterwards, which is kind of fair. Some things were a bit obvious, and I I can't help emphasize the character that she played because this is how I see the movie was supposed to like build on a story from how they were going to captivate an audience. You're going to sympathize with her. You're going to empathize her. She's presented in a manner that's very fragile, vulnerable, very easy to empathetic, very easy to take on her side. The dancing, the highlighted performance really started appearing to me at the end more than being the emphasis of the movie. In that sense, it was decently fun to see. It wasn't the emphasis of what you were gonna go in there and like look forward to see. Right, this one was very much character development and, in a sense, mental psyche of the patient. I personally felt, looking at it, the patient, sorry, not the patient, the performer had a bit of some degree of borderline personality, as in, I don't know if there was dependency or what so, and there was a lot of parts where I thought um, she was a prone at risk of like self harming. Now, it's not to say that borderline's the necessary pinpoint. It's kind of hard for me to say, but she had a lot of emotional instability. I don't know if it was her fragility in her own image or in certain things of where she feels confident towards. uh, I, it's kind of hard to like highlight every single part of it, but there's a lot of strong graphical sexual themes, and in a sense, I think this kind of gives uh, uh, a way for the character to kind of I I don't her erratic behavior. I cannot tell if is a stem from her appearance starting from the movie or something on towards that she always generally had. You could kind of make the argument saying, like the producer kind of forced her into that kind of state of mind where she gets very erratic and temperamental in terms of her behavior. Uh, Unexpectedly, the scene where he pushed himself onto her, and unexpectedly, where that would lead onwards to later behavior. So you could kind of say, is it because she was kind of forced into that position where the producer needed her to become a more suspenseful, right? So she's a very fragile character, which later on becomes very what the director wanted was someone that could be was more uh, I guess unpredictable. The best way of saying it. A bit more a bit more volatile in the sense that you couldn't predict his behavior or like he would like you needed to have a sense of like sinister, like something to show you a bit of wow factors, which he portrayed beautifully in turn for the viewer's pleasure. But in regards to like her performance, that was characterized well in her depiction for the extremes of what they did. I couldn't be sure, right? In actual performance where people go to that extreme length, there are some very great performers or people. There's a ton of examples who are still living as well. People who go too far for their art because they 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 do stuff that just keeps surprising people, and they know they that they've managed to push some of their limits and still come out of it. But like, there's a certain extent to where we should say like this is too much for the sake of like a show performance. The ending really, really caught me off guard unexpectedly. The scene where she projects a lot of violence. In a sense, I guess it's the sense of like her desire to play on that character, which generally she wants it, which is good. Uh, and I cannot tell if that's a in the lines of saying, well, should you let her do it, or should you have given it to the other character, which was played? I forgot the character. It's just easier for me to remember Mila Kunis because I recurrently grew up knowing Mila Kunis playing in different roles, and uh, from the '70s show to Family Guy, obviously, and also coming in interviews where she's been more open and liberal about her views on certain things that most uh, social elitists may be a bit more awkward about opening up. But I think she's married still with like Ashton Kutcher, so maybe she doesn't have that kind of like necessary huge attachment to her public image being associated with things that are kind of have a more nerd implication or like a more. So I guess this is a great form of debate, and it does rely on what the character was going to go forward. Was the direction there, right? He was the one in charge, and the way the story was kind of driven, it felt like the character just naturally, her own inner desires brought out that she ended up playing a role for both the fragile white swan, but also the erratic, unpredictable, what she was looking for, in a sense, kind of terrifying, uh, sinister black swan. But again, it's depicted in a way so that the audience can make the appreciation more than her gradual experience, unlike other things that are more in the sign of realism. It's not really realism, but it shows that she's an artist of her own regards. uh, movie was okay. I had a lot of struggles where I think there's a lot of sexual exploitation in here, and I can't really comment because I think this is kind of like expected in certain industries. And I think where that led her was what made her to start becoming a bit more radical and erratic in terms of like her actions to be able to pull out a performance that was going to meet the requirements. I definitely think she has a certain degree of perfectionism in the way she projects herself. So that comes like a neurotic kind of like personality trait where she needs to feel like she has meet the expectation and demands of what was put onto her. So is she a perfectionist? I feel like it's fair to put that implication, but not to the point of, but also to the extremity. At the same time, I feel like she enjoyed being able to meet that expectation to the point where she actually stabbed herself to be able to feel a certain amount of uh, in a sense, like a twisted nature in her personality, which is really where we're trying to, really what the director was trying to portray. There needs to be a distinction from her normal passive self to someone who is a bit off, in the sense that this person, the character the image she wants to portray, and that this person may actually cross lines and borderlines that normally people shouldn't cross. uh, so it was interesting. The ending really picked up for me in terms of like catching me to say I enjoyed that movie. I'd give it gradual buildup was normal for me, and then the onward ending for me, and this is bias as well for me for why I project things, picked it up in terms of a seven, right? A fair seven or a six. I'm nice, so a seven. But like and really it was just because I could make the appreciation of someone that's so vigorously into what he's doing, that wants to perfect and make it an everlasting effect to project, so the people who are like watching and enjoying it have that same feeling. And that's probably why I project that kind of bias. My own perspective is like, that's where I can kind of say shit, but it was too much, and for most people to say, for the sake of the character's perspective in that line. Uh, okay. I also comment on depictions of queens inside that movie, particularly where she makes her reference of being a queen swan, especially with current trends of people overemphasizing the importance of queens. Maybe it's a nice highlight to say this actress is portraying a lot of self-poise and the importance into the perspective of her role, particularly in the dancing. Uh, so technically aspects wasn't put there. One could say it was current things, how things were happening. The movie still wanted to put a trend to put an aspect that dancing was a good part of why she was supposed to condense her identity. So the movie is really about herself. Uh, yeah, yeah, definitely looks like a cool queen to me. What can I tell you? uh, Also, I wanted to like kind of depict some other aspects in this movie. As well as you can see, there was a lot of scenes that happened, and then she come and laughs back and realize they're not there. But we, the viewers, see a great depiction of her perspective. And likely, when I was talking about substance, now it's not highlighted in the and not shown, but like another differential, you could have actually said this person was developed in schizophrenia. Can occur at a very young age. It's not my specialty to say that on its occurrence of frequency, but all the signs were there. Hearing voices, seeing things, particularly voices. Like she could hear and see certain things of an actress of what she's done, but then it gravitates back that nothing actually happened there. You know, it's a nice disparity. But you know, she also had a very aberrant lifestyle because you could see she was engaging in risky activity. Very likely, she was taking some form of drug medication when she was hanging out with male currents that development. And if anything, I think this is a very good depiction how you would see the perspective of someone with schizophrenia. Uh, if you weren't so focused on her perspective, now I can make that appreciation with no one who is educated in that area, or understand why is it that you see these scenes and you disappear. I just think it's crazy, right? But like you can kind of give it a bit orientation. Uh, she can't help it that she feels and sees things in that way. Now there's other aspects about it, like there's a common example that we see in educational settings. So I reckon like it could change over time. The one that's very easy to say is just like she thinks she's getting messages being sent on some form of like a broadcasting program, which I didn't think that was the case on her depiction of like where she was getting her what would have triggered her psychosis. I think in traumatic environments, schizophrenia can also trigger onto younger patients in that way. There are good videos. I mean, I think the person was swimming, young guy. Actually, yeah. So they kind of happen from young people. I do recall overlapping with some of the stuff that when I was trying to learn diseases and like watching videos, experience of a young person that went into a case where he was underwater and started saying that he started seeing things. Depiction of vision isn't so much highlighted. It's more auditory that we kind of take a stance on. Why I take its perspective, but like I don't have that kind of exposure to speak to too many. I think we had a case where we did listen to an older patient who characterized as schizophrenia was actually the bread and butter of psychiatry back in the old days when the specialty was still very new before it started. Things have changed, obviously, uh, but like schizophrenia was a good way of like where a lot of psychiatrists were encountering and trying to treat people. I've seen things, I heard stories where older patients would come in and talk about cases where they would say they had what you call they saw an angel or they saw the world burn and they had a depiction of an angel speaking to them and to do stuff. right? Or you could say that a horror depiction of like burn the house down from some form of doll. I mean, this is actually an implication of saying you're in lines of saying this person has some form of psychosis. The differential distinction between substance abuse or is it the mental illness in regulation to her brain function and anatomy is something that's going to be very clear and start investigating. Uh, Thank you very much for listening to my review of The Black Swan. Not bad movie, a very strongly graphic. I recommend like an older audience, really like a higher teenage audience to like make it appreciate and enjoy the movie because it's more on aspects of like there's high vulgar aspects. I don't think kids would love to watch this. I wouldn't recommend kids to watch this. To be honest, it's just like it is aimed for a bit more mature depiction of adolescence, in my opinion, for its target audience from my perspective. But again, comment, subscribe, tell me if anything that I said kind of like feels in lines of like your feelings of like I wanted to check out, haven't checked out the movie already, or if you want to check out the movie. And again, I'm slowly kind of doing this, but there will be incentives on people who like kind of cross match and interact with my videos, where I offer some form of cool prizes. Well, that's what I got, but that's gonna happen over time. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy. Uh, that's it for the Black Swan movie. Hey everyone, thank you for putting the effort to watch the effort I placed on making something of an entertaining video. I hope you enjoyed it. As I said before, it's not forced, but like I really would appreciate any contribution and support you give to this channel, as it gives me more motivation and more incentive to enjoy more video creating and content creation. Uh, if you find that the content's drifts away at any point, you can always unsubscribe. It's no big deal. Again, it doesn't mean much. It doesn't take much from you, but it means a whole bunch of me. And it would feel great if you would just reward my efforts of trying to be positive and contributionary. Thank you so much. Bye.